燃え上がれ Evangelion。
残酷な天使のように少年よ神話にな残酷な天使の手で窓辺からやがて飛び立つ
Hello and welcome to Weekly Genesis Evangelion, a special bonus podcast brought to you by the folks at the Weekly Suit Gundam podcast, which is brought to you by the folks at the Weekly Stuff podcast. I'm Sean Chapman.
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
And we are here to, for now at least, wrap up our discussion about Hideaki Anno's Neon Genesis Evangelion. Eventually hopefully next time we'll get back to the wild and wacky world of Mobile Suit Gundam. But we have, Jonathan, some unfinished business to take care of. Because we thought Evangelion was over, but we have not yet reached the end of Evangelion.
But we will, sort of, by the end of today.
Maybe, yes. They did make more movies. I don't know. They're like movies that are remakes of the show, but then they do different things. I don't know. I haven't seen any of that shit. But I have seen the end of Evangelion, which is the movie retelling / expansion of / parallel story to the original episodes 25 and 26 that ended the TV show.
Yeah, so recap to people really quick. Last time on Weekly Suit Gundam, or Weekly Genesis Evangelion, as we're calling it for these two episodes, we talked about the TV series Neon Genesis Evangelion, watching 1 through 26, and that was just the TV broadcast versions where famously 1 through 24 tell a story, and then 25 and 26 do something completely different and do not resolve that story in any way, shape, or form, except sort of on an emotional level with one character, Shinji.
But congratulations.
25 and 26, totally different. And so we were left very unresolved, a little frustrated, maybe even like kind of sexually frustrated, we might say, because the movie End of Evangelion we're about to talk about deals with that an awful fucking lot. Anyway, so we were left a little frustrated, as were people in Japan at the time, because after the end of the TV series, Neon Genesis Evangelion had become a big hit. Even though the studio ran out of money producing it, they got a lot of that money back because the show was a huge hit, merchandised up the wazoo.
Yep.
And so they made 2 movies, one of which was called Neon Genesis Evangelion Death and Rebirth, which is the first hour and 10 minutes is a recap not a recap in the style of most recap movies, but a recap of the TV show, and then had a rebirth section, which was basically 20 minutes of new animation that was the beginning of the End of Evangelion, so kind of like a preview of what was coming next. And then the movie The End of Evangelion, which is like very literally a replacement of episodes 25 and 26. It fashions itself that way in the film, and I think it's important to remember, in the broadcast version of episode 24, 24 ends with a preview, the next episode preview of an episode called Air. The episode called Air never aired.
Yeah.
Episode 25 was different than what was promised in that preview, so the first half of the End of Evangelion movie is called Air, and is basically the episode they were going to make before they ran out of money.
Yeah, it's heavily based on the script that they had already written before they realized, we can't animate this script, let's do something different. What if we just had used the same animation we already had, and then had like a cartoon drawing of Shinji in like a white void?
Yes, so that's what they did, but now we have the movie The End of Evangelion, that's what we're going to talk about. I do want to mention, I watched the Death and Rebirth movie.
I have not.
Okay, and I should say, This is where it gets confusing. Death and Rebirth, you can't really go watch easily now. I'm sure you could pirate it.
Yeah, because they've been recut, like that compilation movie, whatever you call it, has been recut and re-aired and redone like 4 or 5 different times, and I've never been able to keep straight what the fuck that movie is.
The definitive version now, it's what's on Netflix, it's what's in all the international packages, is called Death, parentheses, True, end parentheses, Squared. Yeah. So it's Death, True, Squared, and it is the...
Which is where Kingdom Hearts got all of its naming conventions from. I think it's just from Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Pretty much. And what it is it's the Death portion of Death and Rebirth. My understanding is that they did, like, in the Laserdisc, because Death, that part of it does add some new animation, and some of that was recut into episodes 21 through 4 in their director's cut versions, which is what's on Netflix, it's what's on the DVDs. Yes. Although there's additional new animation that's not in those episodes. So the Death True Squared version is they've taken out the rebirth part, because that was just a preview of End of Evangelion, and I think they made a couple little tweaks to that, but it is the recap portion of it. And one of our listeners recommended I watch it because I said I liked the clip show in the main TV series.
Uh-huh.
And I second that recommendation. I think if you're going to watch End of Evangelion and you haven't, for instance, seen the show in a while, which for me, I took 2 weeks off and then watched it, it was very helpful, get you back up to speed, but it is a Hideaki Anno recap special, which means it's all over the place. Like, it starts with the death of Kaworu, and like it goes, well, it starts and ends, kind of. That's like the framing device, because that's the event that immediately precipitates End of Evangelion, and it goes all over the place in time. It's sort of done character by character, and there's a framing device where all the characters are coming into an orchestra hall, and like Shinji, because this is a character detail about Shinji, is that he played the cello as a kid. So he's playing cello. I think Misato plays viola. I know Asuka is first violin, because she thinks she's the best, that
I think
sort of thing.
Misato should just play an electric bass guitar, and like it doesn't fit with the rest of the ensemble, but she doesn't give a shit.
But like as they come in, so Shinji starts with the cello, and he plays, I think, he plays something on the cello like Bach, and then then there's cello and violin, and each section of the movie starts with a little orchestral thing, and then the initial montage of that section is scored to classical music. It's very well constructed. It basically takes all the best animated bits from the show and puts it in there. It's entertaining to watch. I very much enjoyed it. Some of the new animation is cool. And they basically do the entire sequence from the end of episode 24 with Kaworu and him doing Beethoven's Fifth Ode to Joy while he goes down. And that is one of the best directed sequences in anime I've ever seen. It's so good, they just play those whole 10 minutes. Still is. I know I was a little down on Evangelion in different ways. I need to stress how fucking amazing that sequence is. Everyone always focuses on the episode 18, 19 sequences, and those are great. But I think that sequence where Kaworu reveals he's an angel, goes down, hijacks Unit 2, and then Shinji grabs him, and I will stand the full 60 seconds of footage with him just staring down Kaworu while the music plays. They do it a couple times in the home stretch of Evangelion because they're running out of money.
Yeah.
That is the one that works for me. And then
I think it's like
squeezes.
It's just too long for me.
Probably, yes.
It's just too long to make it feel like it's not there on purpose, and when it feels like it's not there on purpose, it doesn't work.
But it is, in the movie, they do it in full again.
Yeah.
It's fucking great. But yes, that is the death portion of Death and Rebirth. But obviously the main attraction is End of Evangelion.
Yeah. And this is where I have to say that I had originally been planning to rewatch the End of Evangelion, since it was only one movie. Like, I was not going to rewatch all Neon Genesis Evangelion because I had just rewatched it over the summer when it came out on Netflix. I did not, because we are also recording this 1 week later than we originally planned to, because the coronavirus stuff hit big, and I don't like End of Evangelion that much, and the specific ways I don't like End of Evangelion really made me not want to watch it with all the stress around COVID-19. So I was like, I've seen it recently enough that I don't need to rewatch it. I can talk about it just fine. So I think I probably said I would have rewatched it on the last episode. I didn't rewatch it, but I watched it like 5 months ago or something. So it's fresh enough in mind for me to talk about it.
Well, this is going to be weird, Sean. I liked it.
Okay, I thought there might be a chance you would, because it's very avant-garde would be the nice way to say it. Up its own ass would be the less nice way to say it.
Oh, it's 100% up its own ass.
It's
but
it's like when I watched the End of Evangelion, I understood why Metal Gear Solid 2 is the way that it is what I'm saying, right?
So here's the thing. I didn't like it in the sense of like, my life has been changed. I bow at the altar of Eva. I'm pricing out the Japanese Blu-ray box. I'm not doing it. By the way, the Japanese Blu-ray box is like $600.
Yeah. No, there's a reason why it's a big deal that Netflix got Eva, because it was hard to watch wherever you were in the world.
Yes. So, it does not suddenly like change my entire perspective on the series, but I will say this. If the way I had watched the show had been 1 through 24, Kaworu gets squished, and then I did End of Eva as 25 and 26, and then maybe I watched the original 25 and 26 as a supplement, I would have been quite a bit more positive on Evangelion last week. Because whether it's a good or a bad ending, it is an actual ending.
Sure,
and it is a climax that like follows up on Asuka's in the hospital depressed. Where do we go with her? Misato has this. I actually like the Asuka stuff in this movie. Not
I
some of
was
the stuff-
I was saying, where do we go with her immediately?
Okay, I know. We'll get to that scene.
Yeah,
I was thinking more of the scene where she comes back and has a really cool action scene.
Yeah.
That's more what I meant. Not she has a sex crime committed against her while she's unconscious. Ava gonna Ava.
Sure, I feel like End of Eva really Ava's in some places.
In End of Ava's.
They get some shit in this movie that you wouldn't have been able to air on TV.
Yeah, the first 2 minutes. But anyway, you get that. You get a wrap up to certain characters like Misato. Some are better than others. I kind of like Misato's resolution. I think is better than some of the other women in the movie because she kind of gets to go out on her own terms versus some of the other characters. But it is a very clear there are all these plot threads in particularly 20 to 24. Have a lot of plot threads introduced about the Human Instrumentality Project and SEAL and what they're up to and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and obviously Gendo's up to something, and
Dead Sea Scrolls.
Shinji's mother has something to do with the Ava, and obviously you get Kaworu there, and the Last Angel comes in, and there are all these plot threads that, I didn't love Eva the TV show, but I did like the second half quite a bit more than the first half, and I did get invested in some of this stuff. And obviously, 25 and 26 don't do anything with that stuff. Yeah. If you've seen End of Eva, you can interpret 25 and 26 as being a version of those events, but just watching the TV series, for me, there's no way to do that. That's not
you
in
have
there.
just from the TV series, you have absolutely no context for what human instrumentality means, so you don't understand that it's supposed to be this, it culminates in the thing that all mecha shows culminate into for some reason, which is some sort of weird talk about psychic gestalts of human consciousnesses, whether it's Gundam, this, Ideon, that, in Neon Genesis Evangelion. I don't know why mecha shows like to do this. They really like this concept.
Yes.
But you don't have any context for it in the TV show, so you don't have any sense of, that's what this weird psychic space is supposed to be an expression of what the Human Instrumentality Project in Third Impact actually is, whereas the movie has a lot of that stuff, but it sets up that stuff is a direct consequence of the Third Impact and weird super naked Rey and all that kind of stuff.
Whatever you think of End of Evangelion, it is an ending. It takes all that stuff. It very much feels like the episodes they would have made if they had the time and money. It is that it even says, this is episode 25. It has both the Japanese and English title. It has the act break. It has credits
a
in the
mid-credit sequence like it's a fucking video game.
Yep, it's all there, and you can I actually watched it in two halves. I watched it as episode 25 credits, took a break, had dinner, came back 26, and it works totally fine in that way. I'm almost surprised it isn't just broken up and shown that way on the DVDs with the original 25 and 26 as a fun extra, because it's so clearly. Again, regardless of what you think of each one, it's so clearly this is the ending they meant to do.
Yeah.
But on a bigger scale than they ever could have done on television.
Oh yeah, much more elaborate animation. It is, because I don't love this movie much, but it is a very impressive animated film.
It's one of the most spectacular pieces of animated cinema I've ever seen. I mean, it's wild. It is incredibly well directed. It really feels like all the best parts on a production level from Eva the TV show cranked up to 11. If the big scenes in episodes 18 and 19, the Eva going wild and Eden shit, or the big Kaworu sequence I was talking about where he goes buck wild and below nerve and all that. If that's the kind of stuff in Eva you liked, I think it's obvious you would like End of Eva. And for me, those were the parts of Eva I resonated with the most. Yeah. And I would say End of Eva resonated with me similarly. And I also think, for what it's worth, I don't think Eva in any form that I've seen, I haven't seen the new movies yet, obviously, because they're not finished yet, but in any form, it does not seem like something to me, and I think this is fair, you think this as well, that is super sure of what it wants to be.
Oh, absolutely
right?
Not.
No.
Yeah, I think in particular, Shinji is a distinctly different character to me in End of Eva than he is in the TV show.
No, totally. But I thought End of Eva kind of focuses in on, it feels like it has more of a coherent sense of identity to me than the show does as a whole. And part of that is it's an 80-minute movie. It's easier to have a coherent sense of identity. But it has Dispatch with all the high school stuff at this point. It has Dispatch with the sex comedy. There's still sex politics we can talk about, but it's a different sort of thing.
Yeah, it's just not laughing about it anymore.
No. It has Dispatched with. It's not even trying to be a mecha show at this point because it's much more of a Lovecraftian monster sort of thing. It's almost more of a kaiju thing in this movie, I think. You know, it goes avant-garde in a way that feels very purposeful to me. Like, again, maybe up its own ass purposeful, but purposeful not like we ran out of money, we're going to do this. It's very, and I find it impressive in that regard. It feels like, I don't know if I want to say it's the best of what Eva has to offer. It feels like the purest expression of what Eva wanted and was trying to be. And I think, because I don't even know how much, like if you ask me, like, grade this on a scale of, like giving this movie an A, B, C, D, or F, I don't know what the fuck I'd say. If you asked me to detail all the things, like, I really liked about it and what I got out of it, I'm not even sure I could do that after one viewing. I just think, like, having been somewhat invested in Eva, because I watched 26 episodes isn't nothing. It's a good invest, like 10 hours of time. We did a podcast on it. I was somewhat invested. This felt like closure to me, and to a pretty spectacular level at times. And I was surprised. There were things in this movie that moved me more than I would have expected to, given my tenuous connection at best to some of the characters in the show. So overall, like, I guess the highest praise I can give it is I came out of End of Eva understanding why Eva has the fan base it has.
Sure, yeah.
Much clearer than I did out of the TV show. So for what it's worth, that's where I kind of come down on it.
Yeah, for me, I think it's there's stuff about End of Eva that I think is spectacular. Like, I think the second half where they go full ridiculous avant-garde, it is like truly visually spectacular. I think there are lots of interesting ideas in that sequence. And then I also think like the Asuka, like the action sequence with Asuka is very good, even if I don't love how all that stuff really culminates for that character. I don't find satisfying or agreeable in many ways, but it is what it is. Ava's gonna Ava in that sense. So some of those like individual moments I like a lot. I like the production. I like the look of it. I like the editing. For me, it is, and I think this is maybe true of what you're saying, that like it feels like maybe the truest expression of what Ava's trying to express. And at the end of the day, I don't like what Ava's trying to express. And I think it is a thing, and this is the reason why I didn't want to watch this movie, is I find End of Eva like a particularly like hateful and spiteful kind of movie. I think it's a movie that hates itself. I think it's a movie that hates its creators. I think it's a movie that hates its characters. It's a movie that hates its story. It's a movie that hates the people that are watching it, and it doesn't have anything on the other side of any of that hate. It just kind of hates, and I think it hates in a way that to me is usually not very interesting, because it also is talking to you constantly. And the thing that kills the second half of like the avant-garde stuff is that it never shuts the fuck up. And that is like the MGS2 part of some of this stuff would be like the visual storytelling would be very appealing to me if it let it be purely more visual, and instead the characters are, there's either like fictional like sort of like, you know, platonic sort of aristocratic dialogues going on in a weird way in his psyche, or it's a lot of imagery that is happening with characters narrating over the imagery, and it just kind of feels like watching a David Lynch movie like Mulholland Drive, and David Lynch is sitting next to you in your ear just whispering, this is the part where it becomes a dream, but over there it's not a dream, this is what this means, this is what that means. It's like, you don't need any of that. You can just let a lot of what you're doing try to stand on its own, and I think it would be easier for me to give a more like giving interpretation to the movie if the movie gave me more space to do that. But because the movie's constantly narrating at me, like, it never allows me to sort of like fully invest in some of the more interesting visual things that the movie tries to do, which ultimately kind of killed the experience for me.
That's fair. I did not find that to be as much of a problem. I think there are, like, having just watched it last night, there are parts, particularly with some of the, like, I don't even know how to describe these images, but the global stuff where big naked Rey is like consuming the earth, and she has vagina hands that are, I mean, it couldn't be more explicit.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, literally has a clitoris in parts. I mean,
Yes.
it's there, like, you know, and it's the world is being sucked in and stuff where some of it is just pure music and visuals. But yes, there's a lot of the sort of a more elaborate version of the photo montage we get in episodes 25 and 26.
Yeah.
Not the new episodes 25 and 26,
No.
but the original episodes.
The original
25 and 26.
TV airing of The End of Evangelion, not the movie version.
Of The End of Evangelion,
Yes.
So, yeah, and I think that's interesting, this idea of it being hateful. It is definitely a very dark movie. It is definitely, it has some nihilism in parts. I mean, it does, this is tough because I think in some ways it does come to the same conclusion that the episodes do.
Sort of.
But then it does have this tag at the end that I read about a little bit, and I take this as a controversial scene among the fandom because where it ends is this scene where they're back sort of on Earth, reconstituted somewhat, and Shinji and Asuka are back in their bodies, and he's strangling her, and then he breaks down crying, and she says, what's the words in Japanese?
Kimochi wari.
Yeah, which can be interpreted a couple different ways, but it's like, this is disgusting.
Yeah, it's nauseating is kind of like I feel like the way she's saying it has that sort of like implication to it.
Yeah, and that tag colors things a certain amount because without it, the movie sort of traces, and this is actually where I like 25 and 26, the original episodes, quite a bit more with the context of End of Eva, because those do sort of happen in End of Eva, and you could slot them right in, and like having watched them, I know where they're happening, which is when everyone becomes the goo, and Shinji is confronting this idea, and it's this big allegory about depression of a world completely without, it's a very Freudian psychoanalysis idea of retreating to a space where there is no distinction between self and the world, and the difficulty in having that. And it kind of, and in a more compressed time frame in the movie than in the 50 minutes between those two episodes, coming to the realization he doesn't want to be in that world, and the world reconstituting around him a little bit. So there is sort of a theoretically hopeful arc there, but it does have this down note in its tag. So I don't know. I don't even know fully how to read it other than this combined with episodes 25 and 26, the original episodes, felt emotionally right to me as the conclusion to this story. And when I say emotionally right, it doesn't necessarily even mean I like or approve of it, but it does feel like because when I say this feels like the purest version of Evangelion, that means it has the things I genuinely like about Eva, amped up to 11, and the things I genuinely don't like. Yeah. We'll talk about the opening scene of this movie in Asuka's bedroom, or her hospital room. Yeah. That is 100% pure Eva. But that doesn't mean I like it. I want to be clear about that.
And I think part of where like my feelings on it come from is also it. And this is like a frustration I have with a lot of Neon Genesis Evangelion in particular, but it is such like an insular feeling thing. Like it feels like it's so, like the movie feels like self-centered or like self-absorbed in this weird way.
Yeah.
Which like it like legitimately like feels like it's a teenager. Like it legitimately feels like it's you have not thought about like other people being other people is like a thing to you, and it's like there's like an ego and an obsessiveness with it that I don't think is particularly intentional. It just feels like the movie just can't see things outside of its own scope, which is part of that feeling of like the movie doesn't know how to give, like, to me, like a great amount of texture to like the experience of depression, because it only knows like this one note, and when it tries to deviate from that note, it has to like get back to it, which is why Shinji like if you track Shinji's like character development, it is really bizarre because it feels like he's sort of zigzagging all over the place along this like weird frequency, like to get back to this place in End of Evangelion where he is like laconic and just refuses to do anything until Misato promises to fuck him, which then gives it as like, okay, I guess I'll get into the Eva now, because now we're back onto some Freud shit. Now I'll get into the Eva.
I mean, he's fully aware she's dead.
Yeah.
It's a little more complicated than that, but I see what you mean.
Yeah, but it is this like he goes from having because remember he has already gone through almost literally this exact experience in the TV show where he was dissolved inside of the Eva and he decides life is worth living and he reconstitutes himself.
Yes.
And it is just the show. Once it gets to that point, the show can't fathom what to do with the character that has like come to grips with something.
Well, and it's the third time because episode 4 is him going fully comatose and then being convinced because the people who and that's the one that fully works for me because it's all in the real world, and what it is that kind of brings him back is the people at school who like beat him up become his friends, and he starts to have and it's a thread I wish the show did better because it pays off in the fight in episode 18 when one of those friends is the fourth children.
Yes, the
and
fourth children.
The fourth children. And he winds up, having to kill him through Gendo's intervention. And I think if that friendship aspect had been more finely sketched in the intervening episodes, it would be even more powerful, and End of Evil would have more to trade on there. But, so it does it then. It does it when he literally becomes the primordial goo in episode 19, and then it does it again here. So,
and if you watch the full TV show, it does it in a vague way in 25 and 26 in the TV show, and then does it again in the movie.
Yeah.
And I could see an argument for it's about how depression is not something you get over, but there's no space there to actually have told that story. And if people want, like, for me, like, what is my benchmark for an animated story that does, like, depression stuff really well, Welcome to the NHK is my favorite that deals with that subject matter. And that is one that shows this clear, like, progression of how it's so difficult for this character to try to sort of escape this spiral he's in. And when he does for a little bit, oftentimes he falls back in. But the whole story is scoped around that concept instead of trying to jam it in at the end, if that's what Eva's trying to do. And I don't really think that's what it's trying to say. I think it's more just like it feels like it didn't know how it wanted to end itself until finally it gets the movie, and then it kind of knows how it wants to end itself.
Yeah, I mean, this is where it gets tough to talk about, because there's so much in this that is obviously non-literal and is either completely symbolic or allegorical. Like the movie still has, just like the TV version of the ending, does ultimately move to a place of sort of unreality and fourth wall breaking, and there is a general insularity to Evangelion that is very much in this movie. I agree with you on that, and sometimes I think it's expressed in interesting ways, and sometimes I think it's expressed in very uninteresting ways. Generally, though, like, I kind of thought this movie, and I don't know even how to account for it with, obviously there is something that is repetitive to it in that Shinji has done this multiple times. Yeah. Shinji's arc is not like Amuro's in Gundam. Amuro does not desert 7 times and go through it. Like, Amuro deserts and he gets over it, and then he grows as a character.
Amuro deserts again.
Yes, they don't do that.
Great episode.
Yeah. He's a very different character than that. But I think, like, I guess as an overall piece of art, the movie End of Evangelion worked for me most powerfully on the level of sort of this maximalist visual expression of not just a depression, but kind of a... because there's something about Eva, this movie, that feels a little more aware of its teenager insulated self than the TV show is, in that it is this giant maximalist visual allegory about insularity in and of itself and depressed states, and it feels a little bit in some ways at points like Lars von Trier's Melancholia, which I think is still probably the best cinematic depiction of depression I've seen, in terms of making it literally about the end of the world and trying to instill in you the feelings of what clinical depression is. I think that movie, I'm not a Lars von Trier fan, I think that movie's a masterpiece, though, and it's like the best of him. And there's something in this movie that's kind of similar in that it is this, the first half is completely Shinji comatose, sitting on the sidelines, refusing to engage while the world ends around him. And I think we can both agree it is a spectacular presentation of the end of the world. It's very strikingly directed, and people are dying, and it's gory as hell, and it is all sound and fury. And then being awoken to that, and then in the second half becoming a different kind of maximalist visual allegory where it moves into the avant-garde space. And I think it works in ways that I could not even put down on paper. If you told me to write about this movie, I'd say fuck you. I don't think this is a movie I can put to words. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, because generally I pride myself on, I am a film scholar. I hope I can write about every movie I see. I don't quite, as you can probably hear right here in kind of this halting way, part of it is having only seen the movie once last night, and it is a lot of movie in those 85 minutes. But that is something that, to me, kind of does work about the movie, and I find Shinji... I don't know if I ever find Shinji compelling as a character, but as the totem that he is in this movie, and very explicitly becomes an audience avatar, because there is a fourth wall breaking section near the end that is a call and response to the audience and is about the act of watching anime and escaping into anime, that I actually found very interesting in weird ways, because I think this show having its otaku roots and kind of coming back around to that and being about that very explicitly, weirdly makes the up its own ass about it more genuine to me, because it has that call in that avant-garde way. but that's the overall register the movie worked for me in, I think, and the way, sort of like in 25 and 26, the episodes do this more explicitly, but the movie sort of makes every character a different aspect of Shinji's psyche in that way. So yeah, I don't know if any of that made sense, but that's sort of where I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think for me, where I wish the movie had this sense of like, I think it's hard for it to feel like it's like legitimately exploring or doing something for me very interesting with the metaphorical or allegorical exploration of this sort of insularity without it being able to either acknowledge, express, or even like recognize that there are things outside of that insularity in a way. Like, it just feels like there's no, and this is some of the problem with the TV show as well. Like, I think it's part of the problem with like, you never hit a point in Eva where I feel like there's like a solid boundary. Like there's like a floor to stand on. Like, it's just so porous and vague. Whether this with the world building, it's with the character development, it's with the plot details, it's with the metaphors, it's with the intention of like the sexuality in the show. All those things just feel so muddled. And here, like, there's something vaguely interesting about the way that like muddle becomes like visually represented in what literally happens in the story. And but without it sort of having this sense that the people making it recognize things that exist beyond what this movie's expressing. And that's what it never feels like. It never feels like there is something here that's like, this movie actually understands that what it is portraying is something that is so purely toxic and is like self-destructive, and it's like the movie just can't kind of like express anything or acknowledge anything outside of it. Like, and like you're having difficulties talking about it, I'm having difficulties talking about like what, like, the feeling that I feel like this movie's not able to comprehend in a weird way.
Let's start with something simple here, though, that I know I think, in agreement on and is more concrete. I think 100% the things this movie does well would work better if the other characters felt more concrete.
Yes.
And
if it felt like
internal.
there was a distinction between, a meaningful distinction between the Misato that exists in the real world and the Misato that exists in Shinji's head, if that was like something I could be confident on because the characters were distinct, that would be great. But the characters are not, and especially in this movie, the movie feels like it's like mostly follows on from what they were in the TV show, but not exactly. And so the movie versions of characters like Shinji and Asuka and Misato feel like slight deviations from where they were in the TV show. And so it's my grasp on who these people actually are is even more tenuous than it used to be.
Because I think if Misato, Asuka, Rei, Katsuragi is Misato. Who's the other woman in the lab? Ritsuko. If basically the female cast of Eva felt more like human beings, were people fully, there would be a lot more to build on here. And what makes me a little bummed is that I feel like they're getting there with some of the characters here at the end. Not 100% ever, but I feel like there's like with like Misato has some really good stuff in this movie when she is like, because I mean all of Misato's best stuff tends to be when she's in command as like the military captain ordering other people around, and there's a lot of good stuff with that in this movie as Seal is like invading and everything, and she's having to make those tough decisions. And there's a lot of the Misato I really do like from the show, and it feels like, God, maybe after a full TV series and a movie, they're getting there, but this is the end, and so you can't make it all up, right? Yeah. When Asuka is thrown in the Eva, and she has this internal dialogue that goes from I want to die to I want to live and fight, and then she has this incredible battle and is awesome and a badass and is like living up to her best self. I'm like, this is something with Asuka I think they were building to in the show, and there was some compelling stuff there, and never got it 100%, and it's not 100% in this movie either. But God, they're on a path. There's some of that with some of these characters.
Yeah, but I feel like for every step forward they make one or two steps backwards.
They do
in this movie as well.
It's two problems. It's a little of too little, too late.
Yeah,
and it's a problem of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Should we just tear off the Band-Aid and talk about the first scene of this movie?
Yeah, because I will say this, because when I said earlier that like one of my main takeaways and like one of the reasons why I just don't like this movie is it feels very hateful to me, and one of the main ways is that I would not use the word misogynistic to describe most media, because misogyny is like there's being sexist and there's having like sexist stereotypes, there's objectifying women, like that's one thing. being misogynistic, which is hating women, that's something that, like, I reserve that word for things that I think are, like, truly, this is misogynistic. This has, like, something out for women. And Neon Genesis Evangelion, the TV show, I think flits between being sexist and misogynistic. This movie feels full-on misogynistic to me. I think it like actively hates and wants to destroy every female character it has.
And there's a couple ways to discuss that.
Yeah.
Because I guess the way I would break it down is I don't think it is misogynistic in the sense of having it like brutally out for women in a systemic way and how it shows its characters. Like there is clear affection in certain sequences for the characters they've built. But this is where you kind of have to bring in the Freudian framework, because this movie very, very much is following a Freudian arc. It is about the death drive. It is about the sex drive. It is about mere stage identification and the difference between selves. And it's actually not just Freudian. You would also bring in Lacan here, and you would bring in Jung. This is all stuff that I'm very well versed in film studies, because we are the last discipline that still takes this seriously.
It's a lot of like late 19th century, early 20th century psychoanalysis stuff. It's all over here.
And I actually think in the film studies way we discuss this stuff, End of Eva does it in a fairly advanced and interesting way, certainly on a visual level, and there's a lot of connections going on there. But it sort of takes the basic Freudian framework so seriously that you are inevitably misogynistic, even if you don't mean to be. And what I mean there is, if you're not familiar with Freud and the idea of castration anxiety, which is like sort of the basic like, let me just explain this because some people don't know it. God, I didn't think I'd have to do this today. Fuck, I'm supposed to be off of school, Sean.
You're talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion. Of course you have to talk about castration anxiety.
So castration anxiety is the notion that in the development of the mind, and the mind is singularly masculine, so keep that in mind here.
For Freud.
Freud.
This is all
Freudian
Freudian stuff.
Yeah.
This is not us saying this.
No, this is not me saying this. This is Freud. In the model of the psyche that he builds, and that model is singularly masculine, a significant stage of development is the boy recognizing he has a penis, seeing in his mother that she does not have a penis, that there's something you have to understand that in Freudian psychoanalysis, the vagina is the absence of something. It is not a thing in and of itself. Yeah. This is important for understanding End of Evangelion, if you haven't seen so far. And that fear of that the mother is castrated and he might become castrated is a significant moment in the development of the psyche. And that pours into other things too. You know, you have the different stages of the development, oral stage, anal stage, these sorts of things. That kind of are what they sound like. Yeah. They're not all explicit. It's not like the anal stage is not about anal sex, but it's like it's about, but is it? Yeah. But is it? So, and in all of those different psychological sort of benchmarks Freud lays down, the biggest and most obvious critique you can make of Freud is that it's not just about men. It is insularly about a psyche, a model of the psyche that can only be masculine because it is set up in opposition to what is feminine. Yeah. And so what is feminine is alien, and it is different, and it is the threat, and it is what you define yourself against the difference that is feminine. And there is no room in that model for a female mind, for a woman having these processes of psychic identification. Again, we're talking about like biological cisgendered men and women. Transgenderism would not work in this at all. Although he writes about what they would have called transvestites, and he's fascinated by that. But you know, I'm one who thinks Freud is I actually like reading Freud. I think he's a very good writer and engaging writer. He's interesting. He has a lot of interesting ideas that are applicable, but this is where you have to draw the critique and identify this, that there is, again, I don't think Freud was someone who went out and like hated women and slapped them around and shit, but in his, I don't know, maybe, who knows, but like in his model, you kind of have to call the model misogynistic because it literally is about the psyche being not just default inherently intrinsically male, but needing to see and view the woman as othered and distinct and alien in order to define its own sense of identity. And if this sounds familiar, that's what End of Eva is. Yeah. That's what all its imagery is. That's when the fucking cross is going into the clitoris at the end of the movie. I think it's actually going into like the vagina and the clitoris is up here. But like it's this very little imagery like the big horrifying things are feminine, and the big things Shinji defines himself against are the feminine. There is a lot of castration anxiety stuff going on here It is a very 19th century Freudian model in 1997,
and we're watching it in 2020.
And that's where it feels misogynistic. It's like, I would not take that and then call Hideaki Anno a misogynist, because I don't know him, and in other work,
and I would never presume to take a criticism about a work that someone created and apply that to that person.
Unless we know something about them and how they live their lives, right? But like, the movie becomes that in no small part because it buys into that model. And I think what is disappointing that in part is that I think you and I would agree, a lot of these female characters have potential to be really interesting characters in their own regard,
they're incredibly iconic for good reasons.
Yes.
Like there are things about them, there are elements about them that are really effective. I think like the performances are great. Like the particularly the voice actress who plays Misato, whose name I can't remember, but she's most well known for playing Sailor Moon in Sailor Moon.
Yeah.
Like Misato, I think, is an awesome character, great character design, great performance that I wish Eva had a lot more interest in and respect for.
Because yes, it has, and I think that's what makes it disappointing, is it does have these really interesting women who could be singular characters in their own right outside of this insular Shinji-fication, but because, especially in this home stretch, it is following a Freudian model so closely in how, because ultimately what End of Eva is about thematically is the difference between oneself and others, and that process of I identification in the way like Lacan would say it, mirror stage kind of thing.
Yeah.
But because it does it through such a strict Freudian model, it is inevitably misogynistic, because that model cannot account for the humanity of women, and neither can this movie.
Yeah, and it's because it can't, because it doesn't draw a useful distinction in terms of how it actually represents things between the quote-unquote like real world of the movie, the in terms of like the first half before Third Impact happens. They can't draw a meaningful difference between how it views these characters in that section. It doesn't distinguish them between how it views them in Third Impact, when it is literally like psychic representations and weird bullshit like that. And so then the whole movie's worldview then becomes just that Freudian stuff. It doesn't make a contrast there. It doesn't have space to criticize anything about its own worldview, to investigate anything about its own worldview. And this is some of the stuff that, like, one of the reasons why I love Yoshiyuki Tomino's work as a creator is not that he doesn't have a lot of stuff in his work that is sexist. He does, and we've talked about it when we talk about Gundam. But he leaves space to like investigate and sometimes be self-critical about that stuff, and he's curious about it. And so his work gives you space, I think, to like play with the contradictions and the things about it that work and don't work in like sort of social and political senses. And Eva just doesn't have a wide enough scope of its like worldview. It doesn't have a big enough understanding of the world and its people and what people are and what make people different and important and how they exist in political systems. It just has no concept of any of those things and can't project any of those things. And so it just falls into this psychoanalytic mush where you just have characters feel like they're acting according to what psychoanalysis demands that they do rather than actual real world psychology, which is what leads you to having like Misato kiss Shinji before she dies in a sequence that's like, I get how in a Freudian way this character would do this. I don't think this character would actually do this. This is ridiculous. Shinji's 14 years old. She's like 30. Like, yeah,
it's a scene absurd. It's a scene where I love everything that happens in that scene until that moment.
Yeah, and she kisses him. Scene. Yeah, she kisses him, and she's like, "That's." And like what she says in Japanese, in particular, it's like so sexually suggestive. It's like, this is an adult kiss. We'll do the rest when you get back. With obviously she knows that she's going to die. Probably Shinji knows that she's going to die, and that there's not going to be anything more there. But it feels so disingenuous that is something that this character would do. Same thing with Shinji masturbating on an unconscious Asuka. Not something I think that character would do. That's something that only a character would do in this weird Freudified world that has no basis in anything. Or if you want me to really believe that Shinji is that kind of person, which there's been absolutely not one fucking thing in 26 episodes of a TV show and your recap movie or whatever that has led me to believe that this is something that Shinji would actually do.
Yeah, because another thing is a lot of this movie, we're getting a little off track, but we'll come back.
Yeah.
A lot of this movie does rely on a criticism of Shinji as kind of a spiteful, mean person who has done bad things, which I think within the walls of End of Evangelion, there's some compelling stuff there. It does not track at all with the sweet little boy in this movie who's been nothing but victimized.
Yeah, and that's where it feels like it was clear in some of those moments that we were like in Shinji's head and looking through Shinji's POV, which we are in some of the later sections of the movie, then it would make sense of Shinji being that unrealistically self-critical. But in moments where that's not the POV we're taking, the movie still has the same perspective, the same tone. And that's where it feels like when I say the movie is insular or self-centered, that's what I mean, is that the movie can't distinguish anything in it from Shinji's POV, even though it's not actually... Maybe it's actually never from Shinji's POV, because it's so... I don't know who Shinji is anymore. But whatever POV it has, it is so stuck to, and it feels like any psychoanalysis you're trying to apply to it becomes ineffectual because what the movie's trying to do becomes so vague and ill-defined.
Well, especially, I mean, Shinji is a continuation of the character from the show. He is a allegory for depression in and of himself.
He's some sort of weird audience insert for self-hating otaku.
Yep, he's that. He's this aspect of the audience. So you have at least sort of three Shinjis running through this movie that sometimes align but frequently diverge.
Yeah.
You know, I don't... So the opening scene with Asuka.
Yes.
We kind of keep dancing around it. It's that scene starts out somewhat compellingly to me in him just desperate to have like a friend to talk to and sad that she is unconscious and wanting her to wake up because like her depressive comatose state makes him worry that's what's left next for him because he's falling into it after what happened with Kaworu. That's an interesting start to a scene.
Yeah. And
then the most Eva thing in the history of Eva happens where he shakes her until her clothes fall off and we see her boobs.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, okay, this is where we're going, aren't we? And then he masturbates and there's a full-on shot of his hand covered in cum.
Yeah, it is as explicit as it can get without actually showing a penis or ejaculation.
Yes. And then he calls himself disgusting, which, I mean, it's very circular to how the movie is structured, obviously. But yeah, it's...
And that's like the first fucking thing
that's the first thing that happens in the movie, yes.
So the first thing that happens in this movie is Shinji masturbating over an unconscious Asuka, and the last thing in the movie is him choking her.
Yeah,
and
no.
This is why the movie feels misogynistic.
Yeah, no, if you want to make that argument, it's very easy. Yeah, it's maybe there's some stuff in the middle that's better, but yes, on the polls, you are 100% correct. And the thing is, I think that scene is kind of a microcosm of the movie in and of itself, because that interesting scene I'm describing early on is a scene where Shinji is a defined character with continuity, and Asuka is a defined character with continuity, and there's a relationship in a space between them that is dynamic and fluid. And then it all shuts together for this psychosexual moment of self-hatred and sexual assault, basically.
Yeah.
And it feels like I see everything, all of your criticisms kind of alive in that one scene, maybe to extremes.
Yeah.
But like the potential that's there, the thing it could be doing but isn't doing, and the thing it ultimately kind of relies on a lot in one very, very ugly scene that does not start the movie off on a great foot.
And I feel like, if the movie was much more deft, like I can imagine versions of that scene that can have a lot of the stuff about like Shinji's self-criticism about his like sort of sexual desire for her when it's inappropriate. Like there are ways to do all that kind of stuff without going to this like what is just utterly ludicrous. Like it's fucking ridiculous. Like you can have only two, I can only foresee two reactions to that scene. Either utter disgust or you just cackling out loud at how fucking stupid it is. Because it's so absurd. It's so far. It's such a ridiculous extreme for this character to take. To actually literally physically masturbate until he ejaculates in the hospital room in front of her while she's unconscious. Like, that's so far. It's like, we've joked about, like, sort of half joked about the sex crimes thing. And this is like...
It's a literal sex crime.
Yeah, it is an absolute sex crime. Yeah, and so it is... But if the movie was, again, more deft, it could have that be... You could portray something like that is more insular, psychological, him fantasizing about her in that moment. Like, you know, I don't absolutely need this moment where we actually see Asuka undressed. But if you want to go to those places, you can go to those places and not go to this ridiculous extreme. And part of it just feels like because it's a movie, they're like, well, we can do it. We can get away with it. We don't have to worry about this being broadcast on TV. So let's push the envelope. Like, it has this sort of like 90s, like almost like vaguely Jackass-esque, like, let's just go for it, bro, feel to that sequence. That is like, I would be kind of interested in some of the dynamics of that scene, of having been someone who was a teenage boy and did have sexual thoughts or feelings at times that were clearly inappropriate. Like, that's an experience that anybody, like whether you're a boy or girl, like anybody goes through that through puberty, because it's part of what puberty is. You can play with that. This is not a way to play with that.
No. Yeah, and I think it's a way to describe a lot of Evangelion, both the end of and the beginning of and the middle of, is maybe taking things too far when you've got an interesting idea and then kind of killing the idea along the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if we even need to say any more than that. Goodbye, people. That's even, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the movie, what comes after that, that's not what I meant, but okay.
It's a great segue, Jonathan.
What happens after that?
Thank you. What ejaculates after that?
Jesus Christ.
It's Eva, it's not me.
I know. But what happens after that is obviously the direct follow-up to the events of episodes like 23 and 24, where finally we get some never do we get a full exposition that makes this world make sense or any of that. Like you said, I actually really like what you said about we never feel like at any point that we're on any kind of firm grounding. It's very, very true of Evangelion. But you get something where we know Seal has a weird evil plan, and we know Gendo has a weird evil plan, and now they come into conflict, and Seal wants to do their own version of this. Like, I don't know, you have your pop quiz you're going to give me later, I think. But I, understand at least a little bit more of it, that Gendo wants to do the human instrumentality project, and Seal are like these weird religious zealots who want to basically bring about the end times through Third Impact. And so there's a big battle that goes on. And again, it's extremely compellingly directed. The whole invasion of Nerve and like the amount of people who die and how brutal it all is, and Misato trying to, drive everything from the command center. There's a lot of very good stuff here.
Yeah, this is one of the sequences that feels like it's very heavily referential to the Ideon movie. Like the invasion of Nerve and all that stuff is like, it's pulling a lot of stuff from Be Invoked, the second Ideon film.
I gotta watch all that.
Yeah, it's much better than this.
It's too much.
Space Runaway Ideon Be Invoked is basically like what if Evangelion was good, is my basic pitch of that film.
Oh man, you're the one who wanted to do Eva episodes. Here we are.
I wanted to be able to talk about it because I fucking watched it.
Yeah, I know, it's all good. Here we are. We're almost done.
Yep.
So that section's interesting, and just the general like tenor and pace and chaotic nature of it, and the editing. It's very well done. It's got great sound design. It's really spectacularly animated. I think I definitely felt good having Asuka get a big final like climactic thing to do, because she obviously just, where they leave her in the show at the end of 24, she never gets any kind of resolution. Yeah. And so having her kind of reawaken, have this big awesome fight with the mass production Evas, which is one of the most spectacular things in the show. The imagery is spectacular. She gets to kick some ass, and then she gets eaten and disemboweled. So
yeah, I wish that her moment of triumph didn't feel so hollow, because she both ultimately gets defeated and killed, and then also everything melts anyways. So it's like all of that just feels so pointless, and it's like it's a really cool sequence when you're in it, but ultimately then the movie like kind of very quickly dismisses it and does away with it, which is frustrating.
Well, because it becomes like a very literal end of the world movie. I mean, it's not 100% clear what the state of the world is at the end of Eva, but it's obviously been changed very much, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole world has had sex with itself, weirdly, is what happens. The whole world goes and fucks itself.
It's the process we're in right now, so,
Yes, so then the second half is where things get significantly crazier. Should we talk about Rey?
Yeah, I think because I kind of just feel like we need to run down the list of the female characters.
Yeah.
Because Asuka gets masturbated on at the beginning and then killed at the middle point. Ritsuko gets shot, right? That happens in the movie.
Gendo kills her, yeah.
Yeah, Gendo kills Ritsuko.
Because Ritsuko is still in her female hysteria from Gendo not liking her, which was in episode, I think, 23, where she destroys all the Rey clones.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, fucking Ritsuko just gets shit on so hard in the movie and the series.
Yeah, so then she gets murdered by Gendo, dude, is the man that she was like weirdly obsessed and in love with for reasons inexplicable. Misato gets killed, but at least her death scene is kind of good, other than her kissing Shinji and all that
Other
shit.
than her kissing Shinji, there's a lot of good stuff with her, like putting the conspiracy together, trying to do stuff, trying to get, like, if they didn't do the sex stuff, it's actually very touching what she's doing for Shinji, because Shinji was this boy in her care who she was part of manipulating, and she is giving her life to save him. That, like, feels accurate to that character and her arc in the course of the series. But then, they make it weird and sexual.
Yeah, and I mean, and overall, like, the movie, and this is true of the TV show as well, because I don't think we ever talked about this scene. Eva weirdly, like, slut shames Misato multiple times.
Oh, all over the place, yeah.
Because in the TV show, she has a sex scene with Kaji that's, like, weirdly voyeuristic and gross, where it's just, like, you only hear the audio and you, like, see the wall of a hotel room or something.
It's like a 5-minute scene at the end of the episode where they ran out of money, and so it's just a still image with the sound,
Yeah, and it's just, like, such a weird scene, the way it's, like, it just makes me feel so gross. And then they do the kissing thing here and her, like, suggested comments to Shinji, and then during Third Impact, during Human Instrumentality, there is a kind of echo of the sex scene from the TV show where Misato is sleeping with fuckface.
Kaji.
Kaji in the past during college, and it's another weirdly voyeuristic perspective. Only this time it's literally voyeuristic because it's Shinji watching it and him being grossed out about seeing her have sex. And so,
which is also this psychoanalytic thing of, like, the mother and there being the father and, like, someone else claiming her, and that just, like, sex being tied to self-hatred and all these things. So, and especially to women, it's wrong.
And so it takes all those Freudian ideas and just, like, piles them on Misato's head. And again, the TV show does this. I feel like End of Eva compresses it a lot, and so it's like all those features are here. So it slut shames her. Rei gets groped by Gendo, right? And that's how like Third Impact starts, is he, like, grabs her boob and then his hand, like, goes inside of her and then he moves it down to her crotch. And she like twitches and like sort of, like, reacts to it.
She does wind up ripping his arm off and killing him.
So that's satisfying, but it also, like, can't help but, like, sexually assault her before that moment. And then she's, like, naked for the rest of the movie in, like, a weird demon mom.
Yeah, Rei is
like vagina creature form.
I wanted to talk about Rei because Rei never becomes a character over the course of Evangelion.
No, it feels like they kept on trying to, and then they just it felt like they really wanted to in the first, like, 7 episodes, because that's where her character, like, story arc thing is, and then they're like, we'll get back to that, and they never did.
And then in this movie, she becomes, like, this, because what she does is she, like, joins with Lilith and Adam and becomes, like, the god creature in this world. So it's not, I don't even know if you can call it Rei at that point. It's got Rei's character design.
It's not even, this is the third Rei at this point, right? Because the original Rei was killed as a kid by Ritsuko's mom. The second Rei died in the TV show, and the third Rei comes in at the end of the TV show. Yeah. That's the Rei in this.
Can I throw a weird, I don't know if it's a theory or an observation or what at you.
Okay.
So, our favorite game of all time, my favorite game of all time is Persona 3. One of your favorite games of all time is Persona 3. I feel like Persona 3 has some pretty clear Eva influences.
Oh, yes, yeah.
But a lot of it, pretty much every one of those feels to me like they looked at Eva and said, what's something Eva did that had potential that it never realized? And then we're going to do that to the nth degree and, like, do it right. Rei feels like one of those where Rei, like, I guess this character design in Persona 3 echoes Rei so much to me that when I thought Rei was a robot long before there's any inclination that she might be a clone or something.
Right.
So I think, like, that's an element of it. The end of the world and the god stuff and the death stuff and the egg. I mean, so much of End of Evangelion clearly influenced the end of Persona 3, but Persona 3 does it really, really fucking well.
Yeah. So, because, I mean, just generally speaking, that imagery of, like, both the giant sort of, like weird sort of, like, god stuff at the end and the egg and the destroying the world, like, that imagery, it's not just Persona 3, there's lots of things that have taken that in otaku culture in different ways, like, most of it inspired from Eva. And then with the Aegis stuff specifically, Rei is one of the early examples of a character. So if people know what tsundere is, which is what we usually call Asuka's tsundere, which is a character that is, like, on the outside seems very, like, arrogant and mean and, like, is kind of like a bully, but on the inside is only doing that to hide, like, the feelings that they have, and then eventually over time they become more affectionate towards the main character. So the character archetype. So an adjacent character archetype is something that's called a kudere. Ku as in, like, cool, and that's what Rei is. And so that's a character that seems very emotionless, but then actually has some like an affection deep inside for almost certainly the protagonist character, who's some sort of like weird wimpy dude, because it's always some weird wimpy dude in these kinds of shows, like with Shinji and Eva. And then so it's like they seem very emotionless on the outside, but then actually have this like deep level of affection, sometimes almost in an obsessive way, with kind of like with Rei. So yeah, that I guess is definitely like in that ballpark. Like she's much more well defined. Like I couldn't quite put her in any one of those stereotypes, but like it's clear that it's like a platform that they used to build her off of in terms of like the character archetypes in anime style stories.
Yeah, I mean, Igus might be the best character in the history of gaming, so that's hard to compare her to anything.
Yeah,
she's certainly better drawn than Rei.
Yeah, but Rei, in the character archetype that Rei is a part of and kind of helps popularize, is definitely an inspiration for Persona 3 and like hundreds of other things.
Oh, absolutely. And that imagery at the end, everything once Rei goes God mode and is consuming the earth, and the like literally parts of the Eva logo she turns into with her wings. And
that stuff is all the stuff at the ending that I really like, because I think that's all really spectacular. The problem is that that's all intercut with like weird flashbacks where people are talking and like at a mile a minute about bullshit that doesn't matter. That I wish it was. Honestly, I could just do without those cutaways and just have like the weird imagery of Rei doing all that bullshit.
Oh, I know, and even like. And if it weren't so explicitly tied to these other things, some of like the vagina imagery and the impregnation stuff going on would be kind of interesting if it weren't in this hierarchical framework that we know is so toxic. You know, because they go really explicit. Because for a while she has like the inserts on her hands that the world is being sucked into that are, you know, they're vaguely vagina-like. But there is later, like near the end, it opens on her head and it's literally like labia, clitoris.
Oh yes, no, yes. Like, it is. Someone looked at an anatomy textbook to be like, let's make sure this is as detailed as we can.
Yes. Anywho, and I don't know if that fully works for me, but you know, I mean, it is all of this stuff in the sequence where human instrumentality begins, and all the, like, I was surprised how much I liked the sequence where all the different side characters get turned into goop.
Yeah, that's
like,
good.
That's horrifying and striking. You know, the whole world becomes goop. Then you have all the god imagery and the world being changed, and everyone is a different cross on the earth and everything together. And then Shinji being like called out, like, this is the world you wanted. And there's the whole, like, the sea of humanity at sunset. And it's this orange, you know, bay of water with like the sun in the sky. There's a lot of, again, it's like a lot of Eva. It's unbelievably striking. The directorial and animation talent on display is vast.
Yeah.
But the ideas underneath don't amount to a hill of beans, maybe.
Yeah. But it's very, like, that whole section is very pretty, and the music is good, and like, it's so well edited and everything that, again, if it didn't have like all those like intercut sequences with Shinji's psychology, it would be, I think I would like the movie a lot more. Yeah,
but it's also the kind of thing where you understand 100% why it's as iconic as it is. Oh yes, because even today there's not a lot like that goes that far, you know. And it's wild. There's a like 2 minutes of like that's a fully live action sequence.
Yep. Yeah.
This is the fourth wall sequence where it directly, like, it has an empty shot of a movie auditorium. It has these distorted images of people in a movie theater, pretty much like all notably men, watching the movie, and like it gets blurred, and there's some scenes of like just daily sort of like Tokyo street life, like street signs and the train and things like that.
This is where isn't this where it intercuts? Like, this is like one of the most famous things that gets talked about a lot of times with End of Eva, is like it intercuts then with like shots of like fan mail that's like, die Anno, and that kind of stuff.
Yes, that's in there. And it becomes about, it sort of makes this explicit call to the audience about escaping into another world. It sort of draws like Shinji's experience with the Evangelion into the obsessive otaku fan, and like this sort of violent passiveness. And I think there's some interesting stuff there. It's once again somewhere where Shinji just is so incoherent as a character to me. Yeah. Because for that connection to fully work, Shinji would have had to be invested in being an Eva pilot at some point in the show, and he never was. Like, he never had the moment like Amuro does when Amuro comes back after deserting in Gundam, and Amuro is too into being a Gundam pilot. But that's before he deserts. Sorry, he becomes super into becoming a Gundam pilot, and that's why he leaves, and like that's that whole arc, is that he so ties his identity into the Gundam. Shinji never wants to be in the fucking Eva, so that never happens.
He never wanted to deal with any of this shit. He just wanted to be home and play his fucking cello and have a good time.
Yes. So I don't know if it fully works on that level, but I do think the fourth wall call is an interesting part of this movie.
It's like a fun, like, it really goes for it. One thing that, like, it's probably, like, absolutely was the right choice to cut this, but I really wish that they hadn't because it sounds so fucking goofy. Originally, that section would have been extended and had the voice actors that play several of the characters, like Asuka, Rei, because I think there's, like, a brief shot that you can see some of this in Misato, like, dressed up like their characters, living their living like a normal life or something in that world, and it would just be, who knows how long it was planned to be, because there's like some footage of it that was shot before they just kind of like scrapped it. And then at some point I think it would have been that Shinji says like, or it says Shinji or like some projection whatever just says like, no, this isn't the world I want either, or whatever, and then they go somewhere else, and it probably would have been fucking awful. Because I just imagine that like the quality of the filmmaking in that live action sequence would not have jived well, presumably, with all the like beautiful, like masterful stuff going on with the animation. But it sounds like it'd be so funny to look at watch the lady who voiced Sailor Moon in like a purple wig and like a big red jacket, like trying to deliver dialogue in person.
For some reason, I'm imagining like those live action Disney shows from the 80s and 90s, like House at Pooh Corner, where it was the characters in big like fuzzy suits, instead of like animated. And I know that's not what you're describing, but that's kind of what I want. Where like mascots.
It just would have looked like them cosplaying as like Rei and stuff like that.
I kind of wish they had done that. Yeah. That sounds fucking amazing.
Yeah, it would have been fun. It would have been so bad, but kind of incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, you get all that. You know, crazy shit happens. The world reconstitutes in some form. And then there's the last scene where he strangles Asuka, and then he cries, and she says disgusting, and that's Eva. Yep. And it does, kind of ends on a down note.
Yeah, I mean, so, because then one other thing of note of that ending, just because it's something that when I watched this and then read the manga, I was like, oh, this is where this comes from. So if people have seen the Devilman Crybaby anime on Netflix, it was very good. It's not without its problems, but overall it's very good. That is an adaptation of a manga from like the 70s by Go Nagai, the guy who made Mazinger Z, called Devilman. And the ending to Devilman is fucking great. It's super bleak, and this is it's a very clear takeaway. Like that whole, all the stuff on like the apocalyptic world with just Shinji and Asuka, it's like a clear visual callback to the ending of Devilman, which is fucked up and really good. So if people want another recommendation of something that has a lot of End of Eva in it, but is maybe a much more coherent and compelling overall work, Devilman has a lot of that kind of stuff in it, and the ending is fucking killer.
Nice. You know, and this is the part where we're clearly overlapping with the original episodes 25 and 26.
Yeah.
Because the psychological process Shinji is going through here is basically what they did to a greater detailed extent in those two episodes. And obviously those two episodes also, I think, move in a more positive, hopeful direction.
Yeah, like, ultimately, I really, even like if I don't love the show as a whole, I do really love the moment where all the characters stand around Shinji and clap and say congratulations. Like, to me, that is the note that I want Eva to end on, because I think it's so much more real than him choking out Asuka and then crying her going, you're so nauseating to me. It's just like, okay, I guess that's the ending of this. Like,
the thing is, I think End of Eva could have gone to that place, because like it's all there. It is the same arc. It like very much clarifies what you're watching in 25 and 26. Because it is all about the idea of that I separation and the difficulty and the joy of living as a separate person with other people you cannot understand, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know if the show was ever equipped to fully do that, because it is so insular, you know? But I think there's a version of End of Eva that could have done basically everything it does, but when the world is reconstituting, have everyone congratulating Shinji. And then, like, what if the tag at the end wasn't something dark like that, but it was sort of like something that's sort of in 25 and 26, where it's just like life going on, but life without the Evas and all that other stuff, and like it's not clear if that's a real world now or a hallucination or something, but like that would be fascinating to me. Like, there's a way to do this that has more of a happy ending, because not just to slap on a happy ending, but because I feel like that's part of the arc they're trying to trace.
That feels like I don't understand why Eva is as bleak as it is. It's not. In that respect, it's not like Devilman or Space Runaway Ideon that they have this very like cold, methodical way that they look at humanity and like address and look at like like the violence that humanity commits, and like it's like that's the themes of what they're dealing with. Is like themes about pacifism and war and things like that. That ultimately comes to this conclusion that like humanity is a self-destructive race. Which, hey, I can get behind that theme because I more or less agree with it, and I think you can tell a really compelling story about that. And I don't think that's what Eva really is trying to be about. And that's part of where it's like teenageriness comes across to me. Is it's like, you're going to get over this. Like, you're going to come out of this and like expand your horizons in a couple of years. Right now, you're just stuck in this mode. And you may not feel like you're only stuck in this mode. But if you continue to work on it, like eventually you will be able to see more than what you're seeing right now. And it just feels like that's what Eva wants to get to. And it just doesn't know how to get there. And so it just ends with fucking Shinji strangling Asuka on the beach, which I just can't find any, like... It's impossible for me to find any significance in. Like, it just doesn't mean anything to me.
It's very nihilistic.
Yeah.
Which is weird for a show that purports to have so much meaning. And tries to, and at its best, has stirrings of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the end of Evangelion.
You got anything else to say? Because, I mean, you're the one that just went on this whole journey last night.
No, I know.
I've been stewing in this for a long time.
I think I said my piece. I still think I liked the movie. And I'm very glad I saw this movie. Because it is so clearly so influential. It is so singular and interesting. You know, at the end of the day, I think where I ultimately come down on Eva is I kind of like parts of it from afar. I'm not a fan of the show. I don't ever really see myself rewatching the show. Mm-hmm. But, like, I guess I'm glad I watched it all to, like, understand it. And I definitely feel like End of Eva felt to me like maybe the pot of gold at the end of the tunnel or at the end of the rainbow in terms of, like, there's something meaty there. And it's not all stuff I like and approve of, but like I'm glad to have been able to dive into it, and I feel like I maybe have some closure on whatever this crazy thing is. It's
definitely like the most like coherent and like self-consistent part of Eva.
Yes.
Like it feels, whether you love Eva or hate Eva, it is like the most Eva of anything in Eva.
I agree. And someday when the fourth movie in the rebuild cycle is out, I do think we should do a third episode of this and talk about those, because I am interested to see what an Anno 10 plus years later, who is grown up more and done other stuff, does with this, and I've heard good things about those movies.
Yeah, and from what I understand, like by the time you get to the third movie, it deviates really heavily from.
There's a 20-year time jump in there. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's wild. I've read a little bit about it too, and I'm like, you know, I know Kaworu becomes one of the main characters, and I liked that character a lot, so I'd like to see him beyond one 20-minute episode. So, you know, I think we'll revisit this at some point.
That's another Persona 3 connection, is the dude who voices Kaoru is the protagonist from Persona 3.
That's where I knew that voice from. Yeah. There's so much of anime is being like, God, I know that voice. Who is it? Where are they from?
Yeah.
Yes. So I also want to just give another shout out. I said this last time. I just want to say it again. I do think the actress who voices Shinji does a just phenomenal job. It is, I think, that's one of those things where I watch and like, this is part of why Eva has the fame it has, is all the voice performances are great, obviously, but I think Shinji, there's something so unique and haunted. I think she honestly gives more to the character than she's given, and it is a really special performance. So
yeah, I think the performances across the board are really good. And like it's, you know, obviously I've been dunking on this movie pretty hard, but again, I don't want to make it feel like people who like Eva or really like this movie, because I know that there are people who don't necessarily love the TV show, but they think the movie's really cool. That this means that like I think you're bad or wrong for liking this stuff, because I get why people like it, because there is stuff in here that is spectacularly well done. It's just, for me, the balance is not there, and if I had watched it at the right time in my life, I probably would have been more like kind of committed to it.
Yeah,
but it is hard for me to fully commit to it with the problems that I have with it.
Indeed. I think Eva on the whole, I guess my last thought is exactly what you were just saying. This feels like a show that is probably best enjoyed if you are a like 14 to 17-year-old boy, and maybe you can revisit it later in life and kind of feel some of what you felt then. But I don't know. As 27-year-old men, I just it doesn't feel like it's really made for any part of the world experience that I have or see now.
Yeah, I agree.
So, are you going to quiz me?
Yeah, so now it's time to get to our post-test. So it's the same questions. I know some of these you're definitely going to be able to answer.
Okay.
Some of them, I suspect you still will not be able to answer. Because basically almost none of them you answered correctly last time. They're like 2 or 3.
Yeah, so so to recap, you gave me a pre-test last week when I had just seen the 26 episodes of the show. I gave as much as I could. Now we have the real.
And these are all just plot-related questions, because we didn't basically talk anything about the lore of Eva, even though it's pretty densely in End of Evangelion. But it's there. And again, if you really care about the lore of Neon Genesis Evangelion, I think it's a PS2 game called Neon Genesis Evangelion 2 that tells you everything you need to know, that is like based on like script notes and interviews with Anno about the answers to all these questions, that maybe I'll try to address some of them to the best of my memory when we get to these. So number 1, I think you should be able to answer this now, because you definitely couldn't before. What is the Human Instrumentality Project?
That is what Gendo is planning, where all of humanity will be melted into one singular consciousness. This is, I think, how he's planning to join with Yui, his dead wife. And it is the method by which, all of humanity's minds will become one, and in some way that will make us, like, free of conflict and whatnot, right?
Yeah, very good. And you then just basically answer the next question, what is Gendo trying to do, which is the Human Instrumentality Project. And you got the motivation right. It is that he wants to meet with Yui because he's just obsessed with his dead wife, and he has been for a long time, and made like weird clones of her and shit.
I wanted to, just one note. I like Gendo's last scene in this movie where like Rey calls him out on his shit as he dies. He still did not get the comeuppance he deserved.
Enough. Yeah.
There needed to be... I'm just amazed there's no confrontation between him and Shinji at the end here. How did this not end with Shinji killing his dad?
Yeah, this is what, like... The last confrontation between Shinji and Gendo should have just been like the end of a Yakuza game where they both stand on top of a fucking skyscraper, rip their shirts off, have big tattoos, and just beat the shit out of each other.
Also, it could have been super Freudian because, like, if you wanted to go for it, you just go with the Oedipus complex, and Shinji kills his dad and then jumps into his mother's womb or something. Like, that's Oedipus.
Yeah, all he does is, I mean, he doesn't even kill his dad. He just skips straight to the mother's womb bit.
Yeah. He missed a step.
Yep. So then, next question. What was Yui Ikari trying to do? What was her whole deal?
Okay, there is a scene at the very end of the End of Evangelion where it is her in the park with that professor dude. And she says she wants to build the Evas at some point because if they imbue them with the soul of humanity, then the soul of humanity will live forever. And it's heavily implied that her soul is in Eva Unit 1, Shinji's Eva. And they even do this like kind of thought process that we see illustrated out where like even if Earth dies, the Eva will survive and take a piece of humanity with it. Am I on something?
Yeah, okay. You basically nailed it. And yes, so the soul of Yui Ikari is inside of Eva 01, which is why it's like so weirdly protective of Shinji and all of that stuff.
So he's literally going inside his mother every time. Yeah.
Which we're going to put the post-test on hold because this is a point I wanted to make that I forgot to make because we didn't get to it last time because there are hints of this fact in the TV show, but it's like very vague and you didn't quite pick up on it yet, so I didn't talk about it. One thing that like, and this is a very personal taste thing. I know that there's some people that like this. I just tended not to. I really don't like it when people just make metaphors literal in their stuff.
Yeah.
And so, because I think it's so much more artful and interesting when metaphors are metaphors. So like Eva takes this thing. I think this is one of the things that people say, like, oh, this is why it's a deconstruction of the mecha genre. Look, it turns the mecha into this like womb-like thing. It's like, well, it literally makes it his mom, and it literally makes it a womb with a fucking umbilical cord and amniotic fluid inside of it. Like, it is just a womb. It's not a metaphor.
And also his insertion into it is through a phallic object. That's what the tube is.
It is just a womb. There's no metaphor going on there. That's just literally what it is.
Surrounded in fluid. There's amniotic fluid and there's the umbilical cord.
Yeah. Yes. It's not symbolism anymore. It is just that thing. It's so literal. I can't even call it really a metaphor. One of the things that's great about Gundam is Gundam already has literally all of that in it. It's just metaphor. So, like, if you get to the Ramba Rao section is a really good example of that whole sequence if you want to read it through a Freudian lens. What's great about Gundam is if you don't want to use a Freudian lens, you don't have to because it gives you options. Eva, you cannot pick another lens. There's no other perspective with which you can look at Eva and understand anything. It has to be Freudian. But in Gundam, you have the whole sequence with Ramba Rao where that starts with Amuro getting rejected by his mother. That he tries to go home, return to the womb in that sort of metaphorical sense by returning to his mother, and he can't anymore because he's grown up, he's become corrupt, his like masculinity has effectively become corrupted and violent, can't return to his mother anymore. And because of that, he then clings to the symbol of his masculinity, which is the Gundam, which is also a womb-like structure that he hides inside of and protects himself. So he replaces the literal mother with an artificial womb, which is the Gundam. And then when Captain Bright tries to take that artificial womb away from him, Amuro can't deal with the stress and anxiety from that, so he takes it and runs away with it. During that process, he encounters Ramba Rao, who is a representation of like idealized masculinity in the world of Gundam. He has this sort of like very constructive relationship with this beautiful woman, Hamon. He's a great leader to all of his men. All of his men love him. He's very cool and got a big mustache and a nice burly voice. He's incredibly manly. And he's got the only other mecha so far that goes toe-to-toe with the Gundam, which is the Goof. And so then Amuro gets into a fight with him. This is your whole Oedipal thing where he has to kill the father to sort of like prove himself, improve his own masculinity. In that process, the womb is literally sliced open. And Amuro is forcibly removed from the womb because in combat it is destroyed. And Ramba Rao tells him, this is not you. You are not doing this. This is your machine. This is your womb. This is what you're writing inside of that is giving you power, but it's not yourself. You're still just a boy. And from that point forward, Amuro changes his whole view about masculinity and is removed from the womb. All that is in Gundam. It is baked into the show. And if you want to apply a psychoanalytic lens, it is there. But it is there as an option, which is what makes Gundam really fucking good and Eva mostly tedious to me.
Gundam is so fucking good.
It's so good.
I don't think we've stressed that enough through these discussions, Sean. Gundam makes Eva look fucking pathetic.
Yes.
I think I could have enjoyed Eva a little bit more if I'd never seen Gundam. It's like, to me, like, you know the meme of there's the boyfriend and the girlfriend, and the boyfriend is looking at another woman, and the girlfriend is like, what? The girl is Gundam, the boyfriend is anime fans, and the other woman is Eva.
Yes.
It's like, you have this perfect, beautiful partner. What are you doing looking at this floozy over here?
Yeah.
That's what Eva is. Gundam will be there for you. It will love you. It will give you substance.
Yeah, Eva is like a one-night stand that may seem appealing, but Gundam...
You're probably going to feel bad in the morning.
Yeah, you're going to feel bad about it in the morning. There's going to be a real walk of shame, and then, eventually you'll find and meet Gundam and marry Gundam, and Gundam will be a lifelong partner.
It'll be there for you for 40 plus years.
And maybe there'll be some like spin-offs that you're like, is Sea Destiny really worth it? I don't know, but I've always got Mobile Suit Gundam to come home to.
That metaphor definitely broke down, but it's good.
We'll get to see Destiny eventually. Well, because we're moving into post Eva Gundam shows soon.
We'll get there.
So we'll get there. Anyways, I just had to get all of that off my chest.
No, I'm glad you did.
Talked about it.
That was a great reading of Gundam, and I think it says all we need to say about Gundam versus Eva.
Yeah, and we had to get some Gundam. This is still technically Weekly Suit Gundam. We had to get some Gundam talking here. Okay, so we just did Yui. Moving on. What is the Spear of Longinus?
It's the spear that they stabbed Jesus with. In the show, it's the big spear that I don't know where it came from. It's on the moon. Shinji gets it at one point in the show, but then there's also a fake spear that they use against Asuka. I don't fucking know, Sean.
Okay, we'll address that.
Okay.
If I give you the answer to that, I feel like I'll give you the answer to some of these others.
Okay.
What is Third Impact?
It's the sequel to Second Impact.
Okay.
I think I don't know what First Impact is, but Second Impact and Third Impact are both pretty clearly confirmed here to be man-made catastrophes orchestrated by Seal that have thrown the world into chaos. And Third Impact is what will happen if an angel touches Adam and it starts a calamity that, like, when it actually happens, I'm not really sure what's going on.
Yeah.
Because then human instrumentality happens and that's a little clearer. So yeah.
As far as I know, I think you're basically right. And I think effectively human instrumentality and Third Impact are more or less the same thing. This is one of like the big negative points about End of Eva is I think it does a very bad job of distinguishing Gendo, what Gendo's trying to do, and what Sele or Seal is trying to do. Because I think it's basically the same, only like with some slight nuances that I think maybe like in Sele's version, only like the elite will join the Gestal of humanity. Like, it's just not very clear.
No.
So Third Impact is like a variation of human instrumentality.
Okay.
But I think human instrumentality, like, all human instrumentality projects are third impacts. Not all third impacts are human instrumentality projects, if that makes sense.
This is actually one thing I'm interested in with the rebuild movies, because I know they go into this more with third impact, because it actually happens and then story continues after.
Yes.
So,
okay, next question. What were the other impacts? So we have a first impact and a second impact.
No idea what the first impact was. Second impact, I mean, I know it's the thing in the lore that, like, brought the world to the state it's in.
Yeah.
But, like, what caused it, other than there's this vague connection between Seal and the second impact, I don't fucking know. Global warming?
Okay.
The coronavirus. The coronavirus is second impact.
Great. Yeah, we're out here making our Eva memes in 2020.
The re-election of Donald Trump will be third impact. Yeah. That's when we all fucking melt.
Okay, moving on. What is Adam?
I feel like I have less of an answer for this than I did last time.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. Because don't Adam, Lilith, and Ray all, like, join together in this movie? And, like,
Yes.
Lilith is very clearly the being that birthed humanity. Like, there's enough of, like, Kaworu calling humans the Lilin, and Lilith being referred to as mother, and, like, Ray says Tadaima when she gets inside of Lilith. And so Lilith is, like, very clearly that, like, is the mother of humanity, God figure. I don't know what Adam is. And we even find out in 24 and then at the end of this that the thing that they were calling Adam down on the cross is actually Lilith.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Okay, yeah. So this one I'll answer. So, like, there's a more complicated answer here, but the basic answer is, like, it's that weird little fetusy thing that they found in the ice in the TV show. This is, like, one of my favorite things that happens off camera in Eva is Gendo fucking, like, injects that into his body or something. It's because that's, like, it's in his hand, which is so that they can have him sexually assault Rey to inject Adam into her. Because that's when she fuses with Adam, is when Gendo puts it inside her.
I got none of that.
That's what all of that is. That's how she joins with Adam, and then obviously you see her physically just join with Lilith.
Okay, I got exactly 0% of that I understood.
Okay, so Eva's doing its job then. You basically answered the next question, which was what is Lilith?
Yeah.
It's the big weird white creature that's underground. That is so people lead you to believe it's Adam for reasons I don't think. I think it's just like bullshit. I think it's like. Yeah. I think that was originally supposed to just be what Adam was. And then they changed their mind and said, now it's going to be Lilith.
Because here's the thing, Sean. You actually didn't tell me what Adam is. You told me, like, where we see it in the show. I still don't know what Adam is.
We'll answer that because, I'll get that to the end because I feel like that'll just give away too many of them. Which, again, the show and the movies never tell you.
Right.
It's only Neon Genesis Evangelion 2 or its Japanese title, Neon Genesis Evangelions. So good. So good. Such a good name. So that's what Lilith is. What are angels? These are specifically the angels that are attacking in the TV show and all that stuff.
Again, I feel less confident now. Yeah. Because I think last week I just gave you the answer. They're the things attacking, right?
Yes.
But I don't know, like, because now I'm like, did Seal create them? Because what they want is for an angel to touch the Adam, the thing. I don't know. I don't know where they came from. I don't know what they are. I'm just going to say I'm more confident this week in saying I don't know.
Okay. Well, angels are the children of Adam, is the answer I would have
obviously,
accepted.
of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you know this one because you kind of said it. What are the Lilim?
The humans.
Yeah, humans are Lilim, which are the children of Lilith, which is what Kadu calls us. What is Sele, or Seal?
They're the evil shadowy organization that speaks via big tablets, and they are I think they're some kind of weird, like, religious death cult that follows the Dead Sea Scrolls. And they want to bring about the end times, basically.
Yeah, I think that's more or less right. I think there's, like, some implication that, like, the leader of Sele is, like, a cyborg man who's been alive for, like, hundreds of years or something. Doesn't that kind of get implied in the movie? From my
I didn't notice that. Maybe it did.
Like, yeah, one of the guy who's, like, the figurehead of Sele that they cut to a couple of times is, like, a weird looking dude, and I think he's supposed to be super old, but I don't remember. Moving on. What are the Evas?
Okay, so they are pieces of Adam, right? Grown into... Okay.
I think some of them are made from Adam.
But some of them are made from Lilith.
Yes. Which one is made from Lilith?
Eva 1 is definitely made from Lilith.
Eva 1 is made from the legs of Lilith, which is why Lilith has no legs when she's, like, pinned up.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And I mean, they are biological, because it's confirmed that, like, the purple stuff is not armor plating. It is to lock them in. And they do have their own brains, but they don't have their own souls. Eva 1 has the mom's soul in it, And then there's a biological link between the pilot and stuff, and they fight. But then there are also these like magical, mystical beings that can like bring about end times and go live forever and stuff. Again, I feel less confident on this than I did last time.
You're basically right. Whose soul is in Eva 2? Do you know?
Fuck, no.
Which is Asuka's Eva.
No. Her mom?
Yeah.
Okay.
Her mom. That's like vaguely implied in the movie.
I thought that was just like an allegory and like...
No,
like,
again, this is the problem with Neon Genesis Evangelion. Kind of, there are no allegories or metaphors because it's all made too
I kind
literal.
of liked the moment where Asuka is like, my mom is here, but I thought it was more of like a...
No, she means that literally her mother is there because she's inside her mother's womb because her mother's soul is in Eva 2. That is literally what is happening. That's not a metaphor.
Remember when I said I liked End of Eva? Never mind. Fuck this. No. That's like one of the few moments I like genuinely thought was cool. No, fuck this.
All right, moving on. What is the door of Guth? And or alternatively, if you want to, what is the chamber of Guth?
It's the vaginas on the big ray hands, right?
I think so. Who's the character who says the chamber of Guth is opening?
Isn't it the professor guy? Yeah.
It's one of my favorite moments in the end of Eva. Is it just cuts to him and he just shouts, "The chamber of Guth is opening," and you're like, what the fuck are you talking about, old
But
man?
again, I'm telling you like where we see it. I don't know what it actually is.
So, because I just had to do research on this one because I really had no idea. Apparently, in like some kind of Hebrew lore, the chamber of Guth refers to the place where like souls go, either before they're born or after they die. I don't remember, but it's like it has something to do with like places where souls go. So I think he's like, oh, the chamber of Guth is opening, so our souls are going to get sucked into human instrumentality, I guess. Next question. What is the Black Moon? Which is something you had no idea of in the TV show, but it's more prominent in the movie.
I still have no idea.
Okay. Final question. The fuck is Pin Pin?
Best character on Evangelion still. He's a cool
is he
penguin.
Even in the movie? I don't
He
remember.
makes a brief appearance in like the dream sequence where Shinji first chokes Asuka in their house.
Right, I forgot. It's the second time he chokes Asuka.
Yeah. But Pen Pen, I think they need to do a spin-off about Pen Pen. That's the Eva thing I really want to see.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all my questions. So you did a little bit better than last time. Still pretty vague. So,
I think we're really putting Eva on test more than me here. But.
Oh yeah, no, this is not me blaming you. That's the reason why I had this idea was like, let's see how much of this, without doing any outside research, is effectively communicated.
Because I've done none. I've been good about this.
So what I'm about to tell you again is stuff that there's no way you'd know this from the TV show because it's just effectively not in the TV show. It's effectively stuff they kind of created for the pitch and sort of like lore Bible vaguely of Eva. Which changed a lot, obviously, during production, which was then game development studio got access to when they're making a video game that both kind of retells the events of the game, but then also expands on some things. So, somewhere out in space, there are these things called the first ancestral race. We don't really know much about them, what they're doing, what they were up to, but we do know that there were at least two of them. One of them is Adam. Adam comes to Earth in the primordial history of Earth as what is called a seed of life. Him impacting the Earth, by the way, is what is the first impact, and it's what creates the moon. Just so you know.
Okay.
So the white moon is Adam's ship that he took to get to Earth to help create life. He has several children. Those children are the angels, except for Kaudu, who's created later. He's not one of the original angels. This is the part that I think is very funny. Again, this is just like, if you just read the Neon Genesis wiki, this is what it tells you. Is that Lilith is another one of the first ancestral beings, but she came to Earth by accident. Don't know why, don't know what the fuck that means. She's not supposed to be here. She just kind of ended up here. Her being on Earth and like having two ancestral fucking whatever on Earth at the same time is bad. And so the Spear of Longinus was an artifact that Adam had that is like can kill or like disable the first ancestral beings. And it's like, we can't have two of these fuckers here at the same time, so we're gonna paralyze Adam, and Lilith will be the one here. Lilith came to Earth in the Black Moon, and the Black Moon embedded underneath the Earth's crust, and that's what like Nerve HQ and like the whole city is built inside of the Black Moon, which then separates from Earth when Rey becomes the super god being over the course of End of Evangelion. And so then Lilith creates like the primordial ooze or whatever that eventually helps create life. And so all life on Earth that we know it, not technically just humans, but I think all life on Earth is technically Lilim, and that is the children of Lilith. And Adam's like body is somewhere in the Earth's crust. At some point, an organization called Sele discovers the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we don't really know almost anything about. Like the Dead Sea Scrolls is maybe secretly the most bullshit thing in all of evil lore, because it's just like vague prophecies that Adam brought to Earth for reasons nobody knows or understands or why. But I think the Dead Sea Scrolls are how they eventually find Adam. Sele conducts experiments on Adam, and those experiments create the second impact, which is like destroys half of Earth and all that kind of bullshit. And the consequences of the second impact, as far as we think we understand it, is that Kaudu is born as a human angel. Because a human made contact with the body of Adam, and Adam was mostly destroyed and left only a small, like, little bits left, and it's slowly regenerating itself. And I think that's most of the lore that we missed.
Can you imagine if in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, he never told you what the ring was? And then you never found out what Mordor was. You just know it's out there somewhere. It's like,
and then you read a wiki and you find out that the ring is an alien.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, okay.
Fuck this shit, man. Okay. Next week on Weekly Shoot Gundam.
Important point. I read that wiki. I still don't really know what Pin is.
Next week on Weekly Shoot Gundam, we are going to talk about something that is so much better than Evangelion. Infinitely better than Evangelion. Yeah. And it is called Mobile Fighter G Gundam. And it is the only good thing left in this godforsaken world.
Yes. Pretty soon, Jonathan, this podcast of ours will glow with an awesome power. Its burning microphone will tell us to record this. Here we go! Shining Podcast!